Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining another edition of Sediment Stories. Very happy to have you here. Um, Quick introductions in order first. My name is Siddharth. I work with Veditum, and I'm also joined by Team Veditum today. Shani, Madhapa, Ria, we're all here with you. And Veditum as an organization is it's an environmental nonprofit, and our work is situated at the intersection of environmental and social justice. One of the key things that we really want to do is to transform how environmental governance happens in India. And this whole journey started with a long walk that I undertook along the river Ganga in 2016-17. And since then, we've walked along many rivers across India. Our fellows have walked across rivers in India. And we've documented our rivers, the condition of our rivers, the life of people along the river, challenges faced by our rivers. And we've talked about these. These have inspired other projects also. And one of the things that sort of kept coming up when we were doing these journeys along rivers is the issue of sand mining. And we wanted to then take action on these issues that were really plaguing our rivers. And in response to that, we started a project called India Sandwatch. India Sandwatch is an environmental accountability project by Veditam. And at the heart of this project is an open data platform. Through the platform, we collect, annotate, and archive data in the public forum. The data, along with various initiatives that the India Sandwatch team is undertaking, enables various types of action, enables creation of evidence, enables communities to be able to take action. And that's one way in which we are trying to make sure that the immense destruction that happens via sand mining on India's rivers is arrested and our rivers are protected. But in the process of doing this, one other thing that we realized is for a lot of people, sand, which is sediment essentially, is not something that really clicked in their mind as something that is important. And what we've been doing through India Sandwatch is also to try and unlock imaginations within people about sediments, about sand. And Sediment Stories is one attempt to unlock imaginations for people. And what Sediment Stories essentially was as an attempt from our end is to host dialogues on the issue of sediments and associated topics with people who are working on those things and take these stories to a larger group of people and make them realize the presence of sediment all around us first, the role that sediments play, and how can new imaginations like the work that Shriti does at Strawcture enables the protection of sediments and rivers both. Um, we start with very key questions usually on sediment stories where we ask, where does sand come from? Where does sand go? What role does sediment play in various ecosystems? What are the governance mechanisms around sand mining? And we've spoken about these topics in previous sediment stories. We've done seven sediment stories already. Today is the eighth session. Shriti's session was planned much earlier, and we're doing a redo today. So I'm very happy that we're able to finally do this. And inviting you to join us very actively in the conversation today, ask questions as we progress, but also join us for future conversations that we undertake on the topic of sediments. I'm going to add Shruti to the spotlight along with me. And what I'll do is now I'll introduce our speaker for today. Shruti. Hi, Shruti. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Sid.
Yeah. So today, Shruti is going to talk to us about a topic that we've titled Sand to Straw, on how innovations in ecologically conscious construction is helping protect not just rivers, but also our air, and also helping us fight climate change to some extent, right? Shriti's got a very large bio. I will try to do justice as I read it out to all of you. But I think it's so important to sort of know where Shriti's coming from and the amount of work and effort she's done over the years. Shriti is the founder of Strawcture Eco. Strawcture is the first company in India which has made building material using pressed agricultural fiber panels and this is a 100% green building material. This initiative stops crop stubble burning, which is one of the leading causes of air pollution in northern India. Shriti is also a TEDx speaker, United Nations Social Impact Challenge Award winner. Uh, in 2021, he was listed in the Forbes 30 under 30 Asia for the manufacturing segment. And the first pilot house built by Strawcture Eco won the Green Building Project Award by the Smart Cities Expo in New Delhi in 2019. So I think that's such a lot, and I'm even though I know about Shriti's work, I'm still so excited to learn more today. So I'll invite you, Shriti, to um, add anything to the introduction if you'd like to.
No, no, that's more
Also,
than it.
tell us about your journey on how did this start for you.
Sure. So I think when you mentioned that, for you, um, the work that you do at Veditum started by doing the long walk that you did across, the river. So for me, it started in 2016, though the company started in 2018. So I actually did a year-long fellowship, a rural fellowship, where I was stationed in Madhya Pradesh in a village called Pandhana, which is about 100 kilometers from Khandwa. And though the exercise or the idea of doing that fellowship was to just take a break, honestly, of a year. Before that, I was in the US for 4 years. So I decided I'll take a very early sabbatical in my career. And but that turned out into an experience which sort of has been the inflection point for everything in my life since then. So what I ended up experiencing in that 1 year was I ended up literally shadowing just a group of women. There were 5 women in a village I lived in. One of the women was also hosted me with her family to live for the entire year. And with them, I would go farming. With them, I would go and just do everything that they would do throughout the day. And I realized that during the both seasons of farming that they do in MP in that region, which is wheat and soya bean, they ended up burning the stubble. So for me, someone who had lived until then majority of her adult life in Delhi, I was surprised not because of stubble burning, but the fact that something else was being burnt other than rice straw. Because that is what we all hear in the news every year. It's like, one of those things like Bombay monsoons and Delhi stubble burning. It's like a fixed, news thing every year, certain parts of the year. So I was surprised. And that's how the conversation started with the farmers in the community. And I realized that pretty much every cereal crop that is grown in the country, and not just India, across Southeast Asia, is basically unwanted, considered waste. We don't know what to do with them as an XC2 management. And so, after whatever of it can go back to the soil, we end up with nothing but the only way to treat with is either burn it or try to decompose it with a lot of water, which is also not a very sustainable way of addressing it, because soil also needs certain amount of water, not beyond what it can contain. So both of those in situ and ex situ management seemed like a problem. And that's how my journey started. That by the time the fellowship ended, I only knew about the problem, to be honest. But after the fellowship, I was hooked enough to the problem, or I would say consumed by it because of the conversations, that I took another year of break. I did not go back to my jobs and corporate life. And I decided to see if through my engineering background can we create a solution. And that's how Structure started then in 2018, after another year of doing R&D, where I realized that so that's when I realized that, okay, people are burning straw. What all can be done with straw? I'm sure someone is doing, like in the past we must have done something, because farming has been so like across the globe, it's such a universal exercise. And I realized that in UK, Europe, and for that matter in the US, stubble burning has been done. They have put a ban. They do like follow the ban. In India, we do not. And that led to understanding that building material was actually the most common use of straw in, I could say, like 100 years back. And that was globally an exercise. And that's what led me to see how we can create building materials. And then the exercise of, because I'm a civil engineer, not a chemical engineer or someone who's has manufacturing background. So then I had to find people to work with me, partner with me. And that year was about finding the manufacturers, finding people who were willing to put in the time, and led to creating a product that we have today for last 5 years, commercially being, selling in India and now outside India as well. But in nutshell, it is literally about I think just my intent to keep meeting people and trying to find something that can be done, even not knowing what it would be at that point of time. And it's just been that journey of connecting dots, and now a very structured organization that we have for last 5 years.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's incredible because we hear so many people highlighting the issue of stubble burning and farm waste, and it takes that sticking to the problem to then get to the solution slowly. So, I mean, kudos to you for sort of sticking to it and sort of getting to where you are now. One of the things usually that comes to mind is that, all right, this is such a, like, we know that India is a small land holding country, and the agricultural waste would also be then distributed. So I think, at least for me, I find it very difficult to sort of visualize what this process looks like, where it goes from farm through a process and becomes a material, and then what does that material look like? So if you can, maybe for those who are here but also for those who are going to watch this later, I mean, maybe use some visuals to also show us what this process looks like, and maybe you can also, by towards the end of that answer, maybe also highlight a little bit on what's the kind of adoption that's happening for the material.
Sure. So, thank you for mentioning that, Sid. So when we realized, okay, we want to do something about it, and we started trying to find a solution, the first thing we all realized is exactly what you said, is the raw material is as universal as possible, but it's really decentralized. That means that it's available in every corner of the country, but in a country like India, majority of the patches are smallholder farmers. I must have met more than 300 farmers in 2017. I traveled through 4 states, meeting people who were willing to sell, and actually not even sell. The right word is willing to just give away the residue, because for them it was just a nuisance, a waste. But then how do you collect it in a way that you can create a viable model around this? We realized that we need to actually build the model based on the fact that it is decentralized. And so I will use another case study. So one is of biogas. I'm sure a lot of us on this call must be aware of biogas. But if you look back at the journey of biogas in India, we have been trying to create viable commercial plants to make biogas for last 3 4 decades, and majority of them have only failed in India. And the reason being that we tried to do the same thing, bring a lot of the biomass together in one place and convert it, which means that when it is being transported through a lot of distance, the cost of transportation becomes more than the raw material, and then the viability of doing any manufacturing makes no sense financially. So we decided that we will do it decentralized. So currently we have 2 factories in India. Our factories are within 60-kilometer radius of the agricultural land. So we pick a patch where we know that, okay, at least two kind of straws. So rice and wheat, we all know, is something that is available in every part of India. So we picked 2 states where we have both of them growing in each season. So we are not also dependent on one crop, because we also don't want to ever be a factor that you're making farmers think that let's just go one thing, because that's then you're adding to the problem, not to the solution. So we identify state that way and the patch of land. Then we find a manufacturer who's already available. So the good thing with India is that we have a lot of small scale factories. We have a lot of SMEs. And because these are MSMEs, most of them are running their factories on a very underutilized capacity. So plywood in India, something we all again are very aware of, is something that is grown in very small scale factories across India. And aside of 3 4 big companies, most factories are doing a capacity of about 30 40%, to be honest. So we realized that there's no need to create a new factory. Let's find a factory owner that's closer to the agricultural land. So we found the first one in 2019, and then we found a second partner in 2021. So both of them already have a factory. We invested a bit of money to recalibrate their hot press. A hot press is something which is like a bed. And then what you do is you spread the straw on the bed, you add a bit of a binder to help increase the density and make it have more strength. And then you basically put pressure on it. That pressure is generated using heat. We majorly use 60 to 70% of the biomass again in form of pellets to generate that heat. And then that pressing process creates the panels. So everything that we do currently at Structure is decentralized with factories that already exist. And the idea is to just utilize everything that's already available, then, starting from scratch or trying to reinvent the wheel. And when you try to do that, your from a startup perspective, your asset and your capex is really light, which helped a young company like us and me as an individual even start thinking of doing something in the manufacturing space, because that's not easy. There's when you're in the hardware business. So yes, that's how we look at building it. And currently, the way we look at the future is to, as we grow our market, we're going to keep identifying partners. We're going to map the part of agricultural land that is around it, see that at least two kind of crop season are there, and then build relationship with the bigger farmers, small farmers both, and the manufacturer to convert the straw into these panels, which come in your 8 by 4 sheet big boards that then get used in construction. So that's the entire process of doing this.
Wow. Okay. And could you sort of give us, like you said, each factory is set up within a 60-kilometer distance of where the farms are. Um, like, what's the kind of capacity we're talking about here?
Sure. So when I say we are working with small factory, the capacity of each of these small factory is to be able to process maximum up to 500 sheets of 8 feet by 4 feet in a day. For context, the biggest public listed plywood MDF companies can do about 10 times of that capacity. So that's big, and what we are doing is small in that reference. So with both the factories, we can do about 1,000 sheets right now in a month, sorry, in a day easily. And that's where we stand in terms of a capacity right
Right.
now.
And if I had to ask, say, how much area of like agricultural from which agricultural residue is coming, does it need to convert into a sheet or 100 sheets? Like, do you have any numbers like that? I think it's
Yes.
fascinating.
So in the most simple way to explain that is that we require about 2.5 kg of straw to compress it into 1 square feet of a board. So if our standard sheet is 8 by 4, which is 32, so 32 into 2.5 kg is the amount of straw that goes into creating one sheet that we have at our end.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And I think the panels look quite nice. But if you can like go from here when we have the panel in hand to the next step of, you mentioned that it's used in construction. So how would you explain to somebody in how this is used in construction? And if this gets used, what is it that it's replacing essentially?
Sure. So to explain that, again, if I go a bit again into the construction space, so there are two kind of construction that primarily happens across the globe. It is called wet construction, dry construction. Wet is anything that requires water, which means, and with water, you can imagine that's brick construction because we use cement, water, mortar. Um, Concrete is a wet construction. Steel is dry, and so is dry boards. So our panels, because they are in the form of a dry sheet, they do not require any water during its manufacturing, neither any water to install it at site. So it is a dry form of construction. So our panels are, that's why, so technically these boards are called in the space of civil engineering as dry wall panels, which basically replaces your brick, which is a wet form of wall construction. So that's how we differentiate between panels and brick. And because they replace brick, where they fundamentally go is to create the walls. Currently, they are used to create all interior walls in a building, not the exterior walls. We are in the process of creating a product that can take load of that capacity, that it can even be in the exterior facade of the building. But right now, it's all interior. So the walls, so if you imagine a room, the wall, the ceiling, the floor, the raised flooring, and any loose furniture that you might have from your storage cabinet, decks, workstations, all of that can be made out of this. In which exercise it would replace brick, in exercise it will replace any kind of wood based or dry materials, so plywoods, MDFs that are there, and also gypsum, which is again a mining process. Gypsum is again something that is mined. And you'll be very surprised to know that in India, all the gypsum that's sold, the gypsum board, 80% of gypsum actually comes not even from India. It's actually mined outside India in other countries and just bought back to India and then turned into a product. So we replace gypsum, wood based product, and brick. Those are the three things that it replaces and goes in your walls, ceilings, and all kind of furnitures.
Right, right. I believe you have a picture of one of the walls, and you can maybe move to that.
So this, for context, this is an auditorium which we did about a year back in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. We did this for a university. So all the white walls that you see here, the ceiling which has a light brownish texture, all of those two things are done with the panels, and even that brown raised stage flooring that you have, those three things in the room are done with a panel. So they have replaced your false ceiling material, your brick wall, and your wooden panels for the flooring. That's what it has done in that room. So it was used from the perspective of better sound insulation, of course, just as a wall material. But what it does added, which sadly in India, yet we are not looking at as a feature, is that it addresses thermal insulation. So I know that right now it's summers in India, and we all deal with, we're all dealing with the heat. So one thing that we have forgotten about materials is that in vernacular architecture, materials used to play a part in actually regulating temperature. Now, sadly, we don't see them doing that. We believe that our air conditioners and heaters have supposed to regulate the temperature. The material has no part to play. But if you work with natural materials, if you work with materials in a way that they have the capacity to regulate, you actually will reduce the uh, demand that you have for the ACs and heaters. So wherever a product goes into a build space, it actually brings the thermal load down, which in the long run will then help with the energy bills as well, which is something that our customers have seen. It's proven, and they have seen it in terms of just reduced bills as well, which is the most tangible output.
Okay, wow. I mean, that's already quite a lot. I know that from the first time I got to know about these panels, I've just been wanting to give it a go in terms of what I could, if I make something and I'd like to. One thing that you mentioned in terms of gypsum boards also, it just reminded me that when our fellows recently walked along the Luni in Rajasthan, a lot of
Yes.
and because it's a drier area,
Mhm.
and similar to Gujarat also, where the gypsum actually plays a huge role in holding
Yeah.
water in the upper parts of the soil. Uh,
Yeah.
Many of these fields are actually being strip mined for gypsum, which is
Yes.
changing the hydrodynamics also of the of groundwater in that region. So
Yeah.
I would say it also contributes then to reducing the traction from the topsoil and just under the topsoil and
Mhm.
the groundwater as well. So yeah, just thinking about that. So you talked about the raised platform here being made using the panels, and you'd earlier when you were talking about the uses, you'd also mentioned uh, um, cabinets and tables, etc. So can you tell us a little bit more on what are the other uses that are possible beyond walls only from your material?
So walls is obviously something that we started with. Then this is a image of a cabinet, a bookshelf cabinet done with the panels where it traditionally just replaces your wood-based panels and the finish that you see. So again, when we think of construction, any new material, while I always say that straw is not a new material, we're just bringing it back. It was never new. Is that at the end of the day, the architect and the customer who's, let's say, making the bookshelf in the house, the final thing that you look at is the aesthetics, right? What gets hidden is the material. So if you're trying to create a material or bring back in a material in an ecosystem, it has to aesthetically be very versatile. So just for context, the walls that we saw here were white, which means that they were painted. Here the panels have a wooden look, which means that we have put a laminate on it. And here the workstations that you see, this is for ICICI Bank. So we do a lot of the retail branches across North India. They have a very standard looking finish that bank branches have. So the cabinets, the workstations, everything is done with the product. So the final look and finish on the panel can be very versatile. So you're not limited in using the product just because it's sustainable and then you have to only use it in a certain finish. You can do possibly everything that you can do on a wood-based material on these panels. This is something that we recently did for ITC as a company and even for a lot of other corporates is that we have started making these soundproofing pods. So this is now very common with corporate offices, that you want those enclosures where you can just take your calls in meetings, because otherwise there's a lot of privacy issue. So this pod is made 100% with the panel, and another material that we have recently started working upon. But what it completely replaces is, so 90% of such pods in India, they're either made with FRP, which is again reinforced plastics, or steel. So we have completely emitted using any plastic and steel. And besides the glass, everything else that you see as the solid body is done with the panel here. So those are the other use cases that we have of the product.
Okay. So, I mean, what's really fascinating me is the diversity of use cases that you have for the material that you've created, and it's being adapted in so many ways. So, a few things that are sort of sticking to me. One, of course, is especially this being sediment stories, and one of the interests that we had in bringing you here to have a conversation with us is to talk to us and others about how material like what Strawcture is creating has the potential to reduce demand for fresh sediment from river ecosystems, from agricultural ecosystems, and which for us is our primary place of interest. But from what I'm also hearing from you is that it also reduces, in a sense, water use by many, many levels. It is um, also keeping away material like steel, which even if
Mm.
it was recycled, we know there's a huge demand worldwide for steel and hence mining for it. And so these are some things that are coming to my mind in terms of if you think of structure and your work in the climate context. Is there anything more you can say from the climate context for your work?
So the way we see it, Sid, is that whenever we look at any raw material, so we started with straw, but now in last 6 years we have two more materials. But the way we fundamentally look at materials is that our belief system is that if the raw material is already available around us in our local context, which means that it is already an alternative residue, or it is a waste which nobody is looking at, then what you're doing is you're fundamentally not mining or excavating something that shouldn't, because it is doing something way more important, being where it is supposed to be in that ecology. Or better, not creating a new material which is completely synthetic, like plastics or other fiber materials, which then are very carbon intensive in the process. So the way we look at the future of materials is that if more and more materials can be bio-based, we call it bio-based, by which we means that they are biogenic. That means that they come from the nature. And if that could be the reality for most materials out there, then we'll fundamentally reduce the pressure that we have on any kind of mining for at least construction purposes. So whether it is for gypsum, for sand, which is one of the most universal building material that is used not just to create cement but also for all the plasters, which means that almost every wall that we see around us, majority of them in India, because we basically use brick. So all of that can be reduced if we start looking at uh, raw materials, that we go to the source and we reimagine the raw material first. And if we can reimagine the ingredients, then definitely the product would do better.
Right. Okay. And I'm also thinking that when it has the potential to replace wood-based furniture, wood-based materials, then it also protects forests, and it doesn't push for the kind of deforestation or plantation that happens uh, for fresh wood for furniture. I think that also sort of it replaces. But as somebody uh, who's thought about using this material, and I'm sure many others also think about it. One of our earlier conversations on Sediment Stories was with Keyur Sarda, who runs a company called Kesarjan, where they use construction and demolition material to create bricks out of that, which also then replaces the need.
Exactly. Fresh need. Yes.
I think a lot of questions that day, and we had a lot of architects in the audience that day who were asking questions on the durability, the strength, etc. So, is there something on those lines you can tell us about the material that Structure is creating?
Sure. Yeah. So when we started looking at creating the product, once we had, found the partner, My simple brief in my head to myself was that asking people to change their behavior is the hardest thing to do, which means that you have to offer them something either better or at least at par to what they're already using. Otherwise, asking people, especially in the context of India, where most of the people in the real estate space are the most risk averse industry, will never, sort of change their behavior and use these kind of material. So from that context, whatever we are fundamentally replacing, so whether it is brick for wall, plywood or gypsum for ceilings and furniture, we try to use their standards as benchmark. So the compressive strength of brick or the fire resistance, the load bearing capacity of ply and gypsum, we have tried to engineer the product to meet that or outdo that in certain aspect. So all the testing that we have for a product is in comparison. So for example, our all our screw holding capacity and load bearing strength is done in the Plywood Research Institute in Bangalore, and it is done by the plywood code, because there is honestly no code for our product, because it did not existed. So we are like, you're essentially using ply, but a ply made not with wood, an MDF not made with wood, or for the same reason, creating a wall system which does not have brick, but the strength bearing capacity remains the same. And then the most important thing that you can offer to consumers is warranty, which is a sense of assurance that this will work, and if it doesn't, then we're there. So we do give 10 years and 15-year of warranty. So 15 for wall and 10 for all of the use cases for a product. So if there's any manufacturing defect or any issue with water, termite, and fire, we will replace the product, because we are assuring them that it is resistant to those three things.
I mean, in an age of planned obsolescence, I think it's refreshing to hear that a company is saying we are giving you a warranty for 10, 15 years and we're assuring you that it'll work. So
Mhm.
that's fabulous. So we'll move into sort of the last bits of my questions, and I request everybody who has questions for Shriti to please put your questions in the chat. Don't worry about whether the question fully makes sense or not. Just ask your questions. We have Shriti here and we have the time to ask her questions. So from all the materials that you've talked about and all the different experiments that you've talked about, uh, where are you moving next with this? What are the future plans? Are you expanding? Are you diversifying? What is it that you're up to?
Sure. So I'll again go back to the example of a wall. So if you imagine a wall, and if you imagine a dry wall, there are, and if we cut through its cross section, you'll have a finish layer which most often is plaster paint in India. Then you have either a brick or ply or gypsum that will create the wall, and then you have an insulation layer. In India, it is slowly becoming a norm to insulate our buildings, but outside India, it is very common to have an insulation layer. So we decided that now that we have one layer of it, which is the panel that is replacing the brick and the gypsum, we're going to basically do our R&D on the other two elements. So on that ground, the next product, I don't know why I can't move my screen. Ah, yes. So the next thing that we have is the plaster or the finishes. So here we are trying to work with creating plasters and paints, which essentially have two ingredients, which is rice husk and lime. So we are trying to not use sand, we are trying not to use cement, and we are trying not to use binders that are again cement based or something that is coming as a byproduct of cement. So we are looking at lime, and again, like straw, one of the oldest material available. And we are trying to use lime in the way lime was used traditionally. So those two ingredients are creating this plaster, and the image that you have in front of you is of our panels, which is not visible in these two images. And on top of the panel, we have done a plaster. What you see coming out, like exposed on the plaster, is the pieces of rice husk. So our plaster's texture is more rough. It's not very smooth. We have created a paint that has a much smoother finish. So the next step is to create that finish layer also with at least 90% natural alternative materials. And this is something we are doing in collaboration with an organization based in Italy. So they took our panels to Italy, they did the plaster. We brought the plaster to India. We have tested that in Delhi. Now we are testing it in Goa, which is a very high humid region. So we're doing it in a structure that is right next to the beach. So if it can, take that resistance or deal with the humidity you have next to the beach, I think then we'll be able to fully commercialize it. So that's one thing, is creating new kind of plasters again with material that are not coming from a lab, but coming already in the nature, but we are bringing them back. And the next one is one that I see the most potential in is insulation. So I do believe that the biggest issue with climate change that we all at an individual level feel is the rising temperature, the heat stress. And more than us who are privileged to have air conditioners, the people who are living in slums, temporary housing, those structures, the idea of having heating and cooling is a privilege. And that is where materials can really make a difference. So, what we have created here, again, I will use a very simple logic. In winters, to keep ourselves warm, we use jackets. And all of those jackets, the better ones, the good ones that we like to believe, are the ones that are made with wool, right? And that is what literally is the raw material for our insulation. So, just for context, Rajasthan in India is a region which has 60% of the pastoralist, which means 60% of the sheep and the camel available in India are actually in Rajasthan and not in Himalayas, because we often associate cold and that. And from there, what we are trying to do is whatever is good quality wool all goes into creating our jackets and fleece. So that is the good fine quality, or what we like to call merino grade wool now. So we are not trying to compete with that ecosystem. There is a second grade of wool which is more coarser, which is what the animal shear of the skin during the seasons that is not the colder season. So like in Rajasthan, it's mostly the summer season, which nobody wants in the textile industry. We have created a ecosystem. We have created collection centers across Bikaner to Jaisalmer, where pastoralists come to collection center. They bring their sheep and the camel. We support them in sharing. We help them with it in a way where it is, healthy and safe to the animal, and then we collect it. We right away pay to them, and then that wool comes to our felting factory in Bikaner, where it then gets converted into an insulation material. Again, no water is used, no chemical is also used. All this compression is done using needle felting, which is again an old way of felting. And then these bats can then be used behind our panels as an insulation layer. And the second image that you see in front of you is something we did last year in the month of January in Kargil. We did similar pilot in Leh Ladakh and Spiti as well, where we insulated temporary army bunkers. We insulated the only private school in Spiti, where kids can't unfortunately go to school for about 5 months of the year because of the weather. So those are the kind of use cases that we are right now exploring with this material, which is in extreme regions, and then we'll slowly bring it to the mainstream part of the country, where people might, see lesser value because they already have air conditioner. But with slums, temporary housing, and any kind of extreme regions in the country, so northeast, Rajasthan, extreme heat, cold, is where we are promoting this product first for insulation. So all again natural fibers uh, that we are trying to bring back into a very mainstream form to be used.
Wow. All right. Thanks so much. I mean, I'm just fascinated every time I hear Structure's story, and wonderful to hear it at such length today. So maybe we'll stop screen sharing for now, and we'll move into a little bit of a Q&A zone. I've had my chance to ask a lot of questions, but we have two questions that have come up in the chat already. We'll start with those. Others, if you have questions, please put it in the chat. We'd love to get those. Ria asked a question which I think you've partially answered, but I'll still ask it again. Ria asks, does the production of the panels require any binding agent? Where are they sourced from and how are they used? So if you
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So right now, Ria, 96% of a panel by weight is straw and 4% by weight is the binder. Right now, honestly, the binder that we have is a chemical binder, but it is a binder that has no added formaldehyde. So what we do better than mainstream product is there's no formaldehyde emission or any organic compound emission that can, sort of reduce your indoor air quality. At the same time, there is now finally in last 3 years mainstream R&D done, where there are bio-based binders where it comes from starch, it comes from tannin, it comes from lignin that can be used to create binders, and they're actually also very competitive in prices as well. because that is also important, at least from the Indian market perspective, that if we create the same product but the price goes up by two times, we're going to just immediately lose our already existing customer. So now, thankfully, those sources exist. We have done lab level testing, and we're hoping by next financial year, we'll have at least one grade of a product with a bio-based binder available. So yes, that's the binder that we currently have and what we're looking to create.
Right, right. Thanks. And I think Ishani has asked a question on what is the process done that makes different kinds of finishes on the panels, and what process makes the panel moisture resistant?
So to answer that question, when we were looking at all interior panels, we realized that the most versatile panel in terms of finishes is MDF. Something a lot of us might have heard. So it is something that is not used for durability in interiors, because for that you think of ply. But when it comes to finishes, always architects and carpenters recommend MDF. So when we studied MDF, we realized that it is the size of the fiber of MDF, which is a lot more fine, which makes the surface more smooth, and that means that it can take any kind of paint coating on it. So that is was a learning. And so when we were creating the agri bio panel, we kept the staple size of a straw smaller than what it is in ply, bigger than what it is in MDF, so it does have more strength than MDF, but somewhere in between where it can become versatile for finish. So any putty and coating can be done directly on it like you do on MDF, and any kind of skin which is pressed on it, so laminate, veneers, or papers, that is done using a cold press machine, which essentially you press that skin on it, and that is the standard way of doing it with any material. And then the third thing which is important in aesthetics is CNC. So you would want the panel to go through any kind of cutting, grooving. So all traditional woodworking machines, their needles and bits can work on a panel. So that's why we tried to look at what is the length of the wood fiber in all of these ply and MDF and be somewhere similar, so that we don't have to then reinvent the machines and tools. And honestly, if that was the case, the product would have never taken off. So yes, it's a lot of what we do. We do believe is, taking what is already there. We don't have to do everything new, honestly, or different. There's value to things that the way they are. We are just fundamentally trying to do it with a new or a different fiber. Um,
Right, right. And anything you want to add on the moisture resistance bit for the panel?
Yes. So again, studied all the products that were there in the market, and we realized that what plays a part with moisture resistance is density. So if a product has low density, it will have more air pockets for moisture to be absorbed. And that is why the density of our panels is two times of the density of gypsum. And it is very comparable to your plywoods that is there. And that is why the good brands of plywoods that do give 10 years of warranty, we are able to match those 10 years and 15-year of warranty for a product to be moisture resistant.
Okay, okay, that's fascinating. Uh, we have some time. Are there more questions in the audience? If anybody would like to unmute and ask your question, that's also okay. Um, I don't see any questions. Mar-
I have a question if nobody else has anything.
Go for it.
Yeah. Oh, there's one in the chat. Maybe we can take that and then I'll get back.
Yeah. Payal
Yeah,
is asking, what's
yeah.
the
Hi, Payal. Yes,
furniture?
what's the life of the furniture made? So the way we respond to that question is that whatever the life that you expect of a furniture to have, if it is made from any kind of engineered wood, which can be anywhere from 15 to 25 years, is what we tell is they can expect. And that's why out of that 25, we give at least 15 years of warranty further, to back that for them. So that is where it would last for a product easily if it is, kept in the same way like you keep your traditional furnitures in the house.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Madhapa, if you want to ask a question.
Yeah. Very cool to see straw being transformed into such cool building material. A couple of things. One is how does structure look at in terms of working with farmers? How does the sourcing of the sort of, the straws happen? Does the factory sort of take care of it? Or do you all directly work with those farmers in that 60 kilometer radius that you do? And of course, working with farmers can always be challenging. And in case you've worked with farmers, how has that convincing process to sort of, move them towards something that's non-traditional and move to some of these things? How has that looked like for you as a process?
Sure. So, in 2017, when I started engaging with a lot of farmers after the fellowship, I realized that most of them were willing to honestly give the fiber for free, because for them, there was more cost to do anything with it than to burn it. So what we try to do is we try to understand what are the costs that are involved, which means that they have to, if they have to remove it and not burn it, the labor, the baler machine and everything. So we try to quantify that cost. And from day one at Structure, what we have done is that we have paid for it. So one thing that I often get asked is that why don't you give your panels for free? Because your waste, your raw material should be free. But the point is that we do not consider it free, because someday it will definitely not be free. So it's better to design the model in a way where you pay them upfront. So that's how we build the relationship with the farmers, is that day one we have been paying them amount which is more than what it takes to clear it off during the peak season. So during the season of harvesting we work directly with farmers. So whatever they cut, compress into bales, we take it immediately from them. And then off season, what happens is that there are a lot of aggregators, because of all the ethanol policy by the government, the bio pellets and biogas. A lot of organized aggregators exist who also, what they do during peak season is they collect in volumes from farmers and store it. So then during off seasons, when we cannot go to farmer and there's no harvesting happening, we buy via them. So that is the way we deal in taking the straw throughout the year. So we don't store straw once for the entire year. We almost take straw every 3 months in our factory based on our demands that we have. I
Awesome.
saw there was
Lovely.
one more question from Payal, that are there carriers available? So the answer to that question is that any carpenter that you have around you, Payal, who has ever worked with wood, will be able to work with this. All the tools, the machines, the saw, the bits, the blade, everything remains the same. The only thing that changes is the board. And their skill set doesn't have to be reinvented, and there is fundamentally no learning curve. So, further to that answer, when we started the company, yes, everyone thought that it's a new material. Why don't you take the responsibility of installing it? So, for the first 2 years, every client that we actually had a installation team on a payroll that would go and do it. But now, in last 4 years, we have not done a single installation. We just sell the product, and the contractor or the carpenter who is doing the rest of the interior work takes the material and installs it the way he would have otherwise installed ply, gypsum, or brick. So the Karigar that you already have is the one that will do this.
Wow. Okay. So one question that I had is, we've talked about you as a company, organization, we've talked about consumers, we've talked about farmers. But if we think about it as about this as a material, right? Uh, you need investments, you need the industry to work with you. Uh, you need some sort of government backing also to some extent at some point. What's the kind of appetite you've seen in that ecosystem when it comes to a new material like this? Is there an appetite?
So when we started off until now, the one thing that I've realized with at least the Indian market is that there is an appetite to use a better material, both at a commercial building level, residential, private customers, government. But what really matters at the end of the day is the price. So the way I say it, that everyone who buys a product, sustainability is the byproduct. They're buying it for the durability, they're buying it for the aesthetics, and they're buying it for the price point because the price makes sense. So from day one, the decentralized way of manufacturing, the asset light model, helped us to have a price point that was day one 15% more than ply, and today already at par with ply, which means that you don't have to spend extra out of your pocket. So I think with business approach to any problem, the biggest differentiator is price. And I think that is what has created a bigger appetite in the Indian market in last 4 years. For us, when it comes to the government, What they have supported us with is that we definitely have reduced GST. So just for context, for people on this call, so most interior products, your plywoods and gypsum, they have an 18% GST. Our product has a 12% GST. We are further in talks with the government. We are part of a committee where we are trying to convince them to make it further 5% instead of 12. So whatever it becomes lesser is the value to a B2B or a B2C customer directly as a lesser price that they'll pay for the product. But so if I use the example of ply, in India every year about 20,000 crore worth of ply is used. And in India every year about 3 billion bricks are consumed. So that is how big, how mainstream it is to use brick and ply for furniture and walls. And that is how big, is the capacity of the market size to replace it as well then, if the product, at price and functionality makes sense.
Okay. Okay. I have one last question, and then we'll go into the last bit of announcements, etc., that we want to make. Is that I live in Calcutta. I want to use this material to make something. How do I, as an individual, get hold of this material?
Yes. So I think now for last 2 years, my role in the company is to do that. Is how can we find more partners and make it available in more cities. So the good news is said that we now finally have a partner in Kolkata. We did two projects in Kolkata recently. We renovated a heritage buildings auditorium, a hotel, and an office. So now we have a partner who will be able to provide the product in Kolkata to customers. And that is what we, so right now, of course, how it is a standard, you start with tier 1 cities. So currently almost all tier 1 cities, we have a partner representing us, which means that the material can be available to you. And then further we are looking to get into the tier 2 cities as well. These partners are people who are again already selling building materials to contractors, architects. So these are not new entities, they're already part of the ecosystem. And then they support you with samples, they support you in giving you the product at a much faster delivery and lead time. So yes, what I'm trying to do now is to like every month just add on more partners so that it is just more physically available in more cities.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm going to definitely get something for a new office soon.
Sure.
But anything that you want to end with from your end before I get into the announcements, etc. bit?
I mean, the one thing that I often end my conversation around this is that I know that whenever people think of materials, our biggest apprehension is around safety. And the one thing I like to tell people is that if we actually go back 100 years back, or we now today go on Google and you actually look up homes, you will see that the most earthquake resistant, the most, weather resistant buildings were made with bamboo. They were straw, compressed roofs, what we call thatch roofs that still exist in some parts of India in rural areas. So these materials have already been tested for centuries, not years. And what we really just need is from each one of us a bit of that, um, how do I say it, that, risk appetite to try it for the first time. And try it for an easy. So I always say pick a use case that is the easiest for you or the lowest in terms of risk. Don't make your entire house, make your study table with it, but then you get the confidence and you grow from there, whether as an end user or a builder. So that's usually what I always keep saying, that we all have to then, there'll be more of us building the back end and the ecosystem. But at the end, as consumers, we have to really, yes, high pile. So flammability. So our product has 1 hour of fire rating for interior use case and 2 hour of fire rating for any industrial use case, which is the National Building Code requirement for fire resistance for any interior product. So we already have that metric met. And one thing that I again get asked about flammability is that it is straw. We watch on news it being burnt, and then you're telling it that it can resist fire. The reason for that is because straw has a lot of silica present in it. Similarly, how sand, a lot of sediment has silica present in it. And silica is one of the most natural fire retardant available as a material on the planet. So the silica that is present in straw is what makes it retardant when it is compressed, and there is no air pocket for combustion. So again, we have not done any fancy coating. It is again the raw material itself that gives it that feature, and we have just gotten it tested by the parameters that exist for ply and all other interior materials.
Amazing. Super. Thanks, Shruti. I've been fascinated by the whole conversation that we just had right now, and I look forward to making use of the material and also sharing it in our networks more. If anybody else has any questions, you can put it in the chat or send it us on email in the email chain that we have with you. The few things that we're going to do. One is firstly, obviously, thanking Shriti for sharing everything that she has with us, and also for the amazing work Shriti is doing. Um, we'd invite everybody to check out the India Sandwatch platform, which is part of the project that we're doing at Veditum. So we'll put the links in the chat. We'll also send the links to you. Please check out and read more about Strawcture. We'll put a link to that also in the chat. And we'll also send these links to you on email. So that's that. 1 second. Let me just put the links. Then come follow us on social media. We share a lot of our work and other people's work on social media. So follow Veditum, follow India Sandwatch, follow Strawcture. I'm just putting all the handles also in the chat. We'll also send all of these to you on email as well. We have not yet scheduled our next Sediment Stories session, but we will take the liberty to email all of you who've registered for Sediment Stories about the upcoming sessions as well. So with that, we'll close today's session. And thank you all for joining on Saturday evening. See you on the next edition of Sediment Stories.